This episode is sponsored by Wacom, Wacom.com. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Face the Truth, the number one podcast in Rogers Park, Chicago, on this street in particular. Today I am super stoked to have this guest on my podcast, I'm going to have to sort of kiss Robert's ass a little bit right now, and he's probably going to be really excited about this. But so my relationship with Roberto goes back like at least 20-something years now already, which is kind of crazy. When I first started getting into illustration, even before that, I started collecting covers he did for Mad Magazine. And then as I started, getting a little older and started getting into illustration and deciding that's what I wanted to do, I started noticing his illustrations in like Illustrator directory books and different things like that. I worked for a magazine doing graphic design, which was a terrible job. But the cool thing about the job was they got these awesome director books and everything. And so I started tearing pages out of there and just putting them up on my wall. So I became a huge fan of his work. And this is a total true story. The night before my daughter was born, my oldest, my first daughter, I had a panic attack. And I waited basically until the night that her mom was going into labor, and I started questioning myself, like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? I'm a joke. I'm not a real artist. I'm never going to get published if I can't learn how to paint. Because at the time I was just doing like little watercolors and pen and ink, and I started saying things to myself like, you're not a real artist or an illustrator. And I remember in my head thinking, the only way you're going to be able to make it is if you can paint like Roberto Parada. That was like my standard. That was like, and I made a decision literally the night that my daughter was going into labor that I was going to become a painter. And I went to my studio, got watercolor paints, and while my wife at the time was in our bathroom and having pre-labor symptoms with her friend. She had a friend in the bathroom with her. I was in the kitchen doing my first painting. And I haven't stopped since. I mean, that was literally, I'm going to become a painter. And so Roberto was like just a huge inspiration to me. And just throughout the years, just like watching his art develop and change, and his style, it's always growing. It's always changing. You can look back like 20 years ago and his style is completely different than what it is now. And that's one thing that I really also feel encouraged and inspired by, because for me as an artist, I'm always trying to push myself. And it's really encouraging to see this guy truly has a love for paint. I mean, look at his studio. You can see his studio. It's a crazy person's studio, and I love it.
Right.
But anyways, enough about that. I love this guy. He's an amazing artist, a huge inspiration. Oh, and one more thing real quick. My first agent that I was represented by, Sorry Levy, one of the biggest reasons I signed with her was because Roberto was with her, and I was like, I cannot believe I'm represented by the same person. So so that was a huge deal for me. So anyways, one of my art heroes for sure, an amazing artist who's always taken time to talk and share stuff with me. So anyways, everyone, please welcome the amazing Roberto Parada. Thanks for being on it, man. This is awesome.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Jay.
Yeah. And so this obviously is your art studio.
It's small. It's one of many. I've done a lot of moving over the years. But I moved in here. We bought the house, me and my wife, in summer of 2016. So I've never really been able to build a proper studio. So I just make do. I have two easels. Yeah. I have my inspiration easel, which is in the garage, and that's a Maybeth, I guess that's what they're called. And I used to use that when I had more roof. I used to like, it's a good crank easel. And then when I have less roof, I have the Santa Fe too. So I don't need it. So that's usually Excuse me. I can only wish one day I'll have a proper studio and I could use my Maybeth more. But
yeah,
now this is it. and I get used to every space. I could probably work in a prison if I had to.
I've actually had that same thought before that, I think I'd be fine in prison as long as I didn't have to interact with anybody else.
Right.
They left me alone, fed me 3 meals a day, and I got to draw and paint. I think I'd be okay.
Exactly.
I just don't want to go to the shower room.
Training for it in a weird way, because the solitary lifestyle is really what they get, except we haven't committed any crimes, or at least we haven't reported it.
Yeah. Haven't been caught yet. But like I'm lucky right now. Like this space that I have is the best space that I've ever had. I'm renting in Chicago, but we got a 2-floor apartment, which is just rare in Chicago. It's really, really big. It's awesome because I have enough room for my kids and everything. But when we saw this place, I saw the downstairs area, which I'm in now, and it's just massive, tall ceilings. And I was like, yeah, this is the place we got to have. And it's the first time in my life where like I can step back from my painting. Like I can actually walk back and look at it. And so
it's important because eyes play tricks on you when you get to stuff.
Yeah. So I would love to talk about your, as I said in the intro, like, I mean, I've been following your work for so many years. And I think actually one of the first times I saw your work before, but I didn't, it wasn't at that time. I wasn't putting names to the art, and I was just, I was like, oh, this is cool, But I think one of the first times I actually put 2 and 2 together and realized you were the same artist was like, this has to be like 98 or something, 97. I saw, the NCN, the National Character Network at the time.
Right.
They had I think you were a guest, or they did like an article about you or something. And I just remember it was like a newspaper interview with you, and it was printed all in black and white. And I remember that was like one of the first times where I saw your caricature work, and it just the rendering right away when I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I want to do. And I remember having that just tacked on my wall. So you definitely had, you've got like an ability to do really humorous caricature type stuff, but then also similar to my career as well, have changed into doing way more like realistic type portrait work, and illustrations for like Rolling Stone and different things like that. But when you first got started, and you were doing the caricature stuff, I'm curious, just like what when you first got started, what was your goal then, and like what you were trying to achieve, and how did you come to that sort of style approach? Because you must have, before you committed to doing those realistic type caricature stuff, obviously you had studied painting for quite a while before that, because you don't just jump into that.
I obviously I learned a lot about painting in art school, but I wasn't really an oil painter art school. As an illustration major, I went to school at Pratt in New York from the fall of '87 to the spring of '91. We would go every year as part of the communication arts major to go check out the Society of Illustrators annual show, both shows. And, all the stuff in that show, which was beautiful to see in person, because at this point, I've never really seen the real art. I've only seen it all in print.
Yeah.
And I didn't follow it all that much. I mean, I didn't grow up really following illustration a great deal. I was an artist, but I didn't really know what was going to be a career path for it. My art teacher in high school told me you should look into illustration. I did, and I had a couple of annuals I looked at. I'm like, well, I think this is more along the lines of what I'd like to do. And so whenever I'd go see the shows, all the great stuff was all people. And in those days, everything was handmade. So you really got into looking at techniques and all the various techniques. And obviously, Chris Payne was, he was one of the great, he's one of the great illustrators of all time.
Yeah.
Was dominating these shows, and he just looked like he was having so much fun doing all that stuff. And of course, he became a hero. Philip Burke's stuff was beautiful to see in person. In those days, you'd also see some of the old timers. You'd see a Wilson McLean in the show. So you saw a lot of variety of paintings. Kent Williams used to be in the shows a lot, and his stuff was amazing to look at in person. Just totally fearless. So I feel like I was inspired by all these great artists right off the bat. But I didn't have a technique. I didn't have a style yet. I could sort of mimic. That's pretty much what I was doing, just to sort of see if I could, recreate a Rembrandt in acrylic or recreate anything in acrylic, because that was the first medium. You're not really trained in art school how to deal with deadlines. I mean, they give you an assignment, but you don't really, there isn't a course in sort of trying to perfect a technique. You're really kind of raw.
Yeah.
So in leaving art school, I feel like I could pretty much, I had above average skill leaving, but I didn't have a refinement. So it took about a good 5 years, but I've had stumbles along the way with technique and figuring out what was right, and obviously, I didn't really have a look that I could develop of my own. Which I think is really important. I mean, it's a pretty normal path for any artist, is to first see if you can be like your heroes. Yeah. And you sort of find your path and you separate, and then you sort of start seeing what you're good at or what you do well. And then you take that forward. And at that point, you're not really aware of style anymore. You're just working on instinct. So I didn't try to create a technique that was me, per se. I had a conversation with Tim O'Brien in maybe 92, 93, to really start to figure out, like, could I make a transition to oil? And he was the only one that I knew that handled deadlines that were really tough with oil. And we had a great conversation, and it was, I think, the breakthrough moment for me to develop was switching to an oil medium, which I found to be just the best, because you could literally develop anything. It could develop into anything. It could look different every time. It also taught you how to work fast, how to think fast, because the medium is very complicated at first. And once you figure it out, it'd be like playing an instrument. Once you figure it out, then you kind of sort of, you understand the point of no return and how to come back. And
yeah.
So a lot of it, and it's like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get. It's the whole Malcolm Gladwell thing, 15,000 hours of anything will make you an expert. And I feel, I feel it's a medium I can control and change the look of often. So I stick with it, even though it is complicated and it is not practical, and it isn't something you could just say to somebody. Yeah, you should switch to oils, because you literally have to learn for yourself how to control it and how to work it.
What I love about it is how versatile it is. Like, how many different techniques and approaches you can do. It's like, I think the amount of how much you can achieve and what you can learn as an artist is just, I don't think there's a limit to it when it comes to oil painting. There's so many things, it's an amazing medium. And
you could, you can just about do anything with it. If you wanted to paint thin, you to paint thick, and it photographs kind of beautifully. It's complicated, but when it photographs, seeing like the way, butter might look like on a piece of toast, it has a nice sort of three-dimensional quality along with the image showing through.
Now, what I find interesting is, I do oil painting, but it's mostly for private commissions and for myself. I don't understand. That's one thing that I've never understood, is how in the world you're doing these deadlines for I mean, I'm doing the same deadlines for illustrations, so I know what they're like. I don't know. Maybe they give you more time than I get. I have no idea. But still, even then, it's insane to me to think of doing an illustration for a magazine in oil, and then you have to photograph it, and then you have to probably do color correction and different things. Because what I found the most difficult thing and frustrating thing about oil painting for me is that process is I've never been able to get a really good photo of my work. I don't I just don't have the gear for that right now, and so I have to always bring it someplace, and it's a huge hassle. And every time, like even for clients, they want to see an update. I take a picture that I'm trying to get the best picture, and I'm like, and I have to always write them and say, it actually looks way better than this in person. I can't get it to look accurate, you know? And they're like, well, I don't really, I'm like, oh man, I have to like say, please, you know, trust me, it looks really good in person. And so that's one of my things I've had a hard time with is photographing them.
So I'm going to tell you a story. So I came into the illustration business in the mid 90s, really. And when I was an oil painter by like 97, I didn't really know how to photograph the work to give it to the client. And then I sort of, through other illustrators at that time, I think Marvin Madelson was also an illustrator who was now painting in oil. Used to go to Jelly Bean. I had a conversation with him. I would even see him at Jelly Bean. That was the photographic place for illustrators. They would shoot. Are you familiar with an 8x10 chrome or transparency?
No.
That was the technique. They would shoot a film, a direct positive. Actually, it's still a superior product because you can get incredible detail from one shot. You can't really get that with even the modern day lenses that you have, unless maybe you have a Hasselblad, you know. But I don't have that. The thing is that these transparencies would be produced and developed within 2 hours. So you had a deadline. If you had a deadline, it was due on Monday. They needed it by 6. You had to have that in Jelly Bean by 3. So, and then they could have 2 hours to shoot it and develop it. And then I would have the messenger from whatever magazine would go and pick it up at Jelly Bean. But I had to live nearby, so I was taking cab rides constantly to Jelly Bean, dropping off the artwork. I'd have to build a box it was complicated. It was more complicated than anything you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
You know, I'd had a room of stacks of foam core boxes with Velcro, and I would Velcro the back of my canvas, stick it in, messenger would come, pick it up.
Because it'd still be wet.
It's still wet. And they would just peel it. The people at Jelly Bean would peel it off of the Velcro, hang it, shoot it. And then eventually when I started to understand that the cameras, that the SLR Canons that were coming out were good enough quality, you could shoot digitally yourself, I started to experiment. In 2005, I got a camera. And then I was still shooting at Jelly Bean. I just decided to go in, ask them if they'd let me in the studio to see what they used to shoot. Kind of stealing their secret sauce on how to shoot.
Yeah.
And then I learned they use total lamps, which are like halogen light bulbs. The total lamps have 400 watts each. I have 4. So you make like a square. So you have a lamp on each corner, and you point them away from where the painting is. So, and then you point them into, obviously an umbrella, and you angle them. So you try to shoot you light it on the corners, pointing away, so it diffuses the light. I open my f-stop on my Canon to 32, the full f-stop, so it allows full depth of field. And then basically I shoot it in parts. So I get the shutter speed, I look to see where I get the measurement, whether it's good light or I want to overexpose or underexpose. When it's a dark painting, I tend to I'll underexpose, so I'll let it go a little darker because it's better because it'll take out any of the glares more. And then I shoot it maybe 2, 3, about 4 parts, and then I merge it in Photoshop, and then just stamp out the imperfections. It's still work, but it's better than like having to be on Jelly Bean's deadline. Because by 4 o'clock they don't take any more things. So like I could work right up until an hour before it's due, whereas with Jelly Bean, I'd have to work through the night. No, so I was doing like an all-nighter at least once a week in those.
Yeah, that's just I'm still blown away. But I was talking with Chris Payne, and he was telling me some of his old stories too, where because he was in, I think he's in Ohio,
Yeah.
and he had to like get his artwork done and then like FedEx it over and everything. Right. It's just so crazy to me. It's just, I mean, it's amazing. You know, it's a real privilege now. Obviously, as an illustrator, it's so much easier, especially if you're working digitally.
Right.
And just even with digital, you know, deadlines, like it's still insane, the deadlines. And so I'm just blown away.
Now,
you know,
it's harder now than it ever was.
Yeah,
there is the digital space and the internet and everything has made everything demand faster. So
yeah.
And when I do a piece, they put it up online quickly before it even gets printed. So they have it already in the atmosphere so they can break the story because everybody's scooping everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like that piece that you I saw you do, you had a piece, I think, for the Wall Street Journal this last week or whatever, a 24-hour piece, oil painting with several characters in a atmosphere. It was like Abe Lincoln and it was like, I don't know if it was Reagan and a bunch of different people, but that's insane.
It was insane. And I had to get them to crop it, like, because initially they had a larger cropping, and I'm like, there's no way we're going to make that deadline. And in many ways, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it because I was going to have to work a lot smaller. And I tend to work small, but not tiny.
Yeah.
18 by 24 is my normal size. I'll work 16 by 20. When I start to get smaller, at times I feel like it actually takes more time to do.
Yeah.
Get smaller. But in this case, I just worked on adrenaline, and I think it was really more of an adrenaline rush that I got. I didn't feel tired throughout. I did crash and sleep for 4 hours, and then woke up and just finished it off. But it was the faces were kind of not as complicated, and I didn't do a drawing beforehand because that would only kill more hours. So I go right to the painting. So I just do almost like what can I say? Just do like sort of filling in spots, just sort of a little flesh tone here, a little flesh tone there, and start doing the darks, and start really just even cutting it or separating it with just like I do a burnt umber and white, or not really, burnt umber and white, sort of way to outline something. So because that dries fast, I can go back in there and put color in there. Burnt umber is my dryer.
Yeah.
If I need something to dry quick, it works very, very well.
So you didn't have you didn't do like a pre-sketch for approval. You just
I did a sketch for approval, but it's not. It was loose. And then when I go to the painting, it's just I stretch my own canvases, so I got to do that. And then I get the palette ready. Once the palette's ready, I just attack it at that point.
That's awesome, man. Jeez. That's crazy.
I feel like it's easier to draw with brushes than it is if I were to draw it in pencil. The brushes, because I'm able to block out quicker and do shapes, and then you can go in easily in oil paint and detail with a brush.
I was thinking about you on. I got a really quick, like late afternoon Monday. I got called to do an illustration full page thing, and I just saw your post that you did, and so I got my sketch. I did it really quick. I was taking my daughters to a movie, and so I got back from the movie at 9:00 at night, did like a 25-30 minute sketch, went to bed, woke up like 4 or 5 in the morning. This is great. Go ahead with it. And I just had the whole day to paint it. And so I'm thinking about you like during the day, because I'm like, I mean, just for me to do that in one day with digital, I'm like, how the heck? Like, no way, man. It's just amazing. Because, like, I guess for me, I mean, obviously you've been doing it this way for so long. Like, it's like for me, when I oil paint, it's more of a religious experience for me. Like, I feel like I just love it so much that I don't want it to be bothered. I'm just like in my zone. And I think I just really kind of over enjoy every brush stroke. Like I get, you know what I mean? And even when I'm working on a commission for somebody, I'm not a super fast. I mean, I can paint fast if I have to, but like that kind of a deadline. I mean, what ended up happening with me early on was that I was working traditionally for magazines. I was working with acrylics at the time, and I was doing like, normal illustration deadlines and just stressed out, just so stressed out. And that's why I ended up going to art school for a couple of years, because I thought somehow maybe they'll teach me how to work faster.
Right.
And it didn't really do that. But what ended up happening is a buddy of mine, and my dad and a friend of mine were like, you should try this digital stuff. And I just was like, no, that is not art. I was totally against it. And they just kept pushing, like, dude, you should seriously try it, man. You can actually do real painting. And I'm like, no way, man. And then what happened was I finally went to like a Best Buy and got like this small little teeny thing for like $100. And I got a deadline for Muscle Magazine to paint Arnold Schwarzenegger. And if I think back about it, it was kind of crazy that I just decided, well, I'll just do this one digitally, and I've never painted digitally before. And like, I mean, it was kind of stupid, to be honest, because they're expecting a certain style of mine,
Right.
But I jumped into it. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like painting. And I did the painting so fast, and I couldn't believe it. I sent it to them, and they were like, whoa, this is crazy. And that was it. I was like, you know what? I'm not doing traditional anymore for magazines, because the amount of stress that was lifted off my shoulders at that moment, and I realized what I could do. So I have so much, like I see you, Tim O'Brien, Chris Payne. There's so many, badass artists out there that are still doing traditional stuff. And it's just crazy to me. Like, it's just crazy. Cause like I see like all those musicians that you did recently, for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing. I mean, that's like how many was like 30 or something people?
It was 37 people,
37.
But then I had to do somebody 3 times.
Oh no!
And it was a directive from the highest up.
Yeah.
But that was okay with me, because I felt like all 3 were pretty good, so I enjoyed all 3 of them. But yeah, it was. I was given time, though. I had a decent amount of time, so I was trying to do it at my pace. I also did a book cover in the middle of that too. It was also complicated. But they just, I was allowed time there. I didn't have to like completely stress out over it. And I was in before the deadline.
Yeah.
Everything worked out well. But yeah, I knew they were going to be shrunken down smaller. So I tried to use a simple palette. And that's really the technique for working fast, is simplify your palette.
Yeah.
Real simple. And if you sort of go by that, then you don't have to like sort of spend time making too many color decisions, and then you're painting, and then before you know it, you can create a likeness or just any kind of image you want quickly, and have it sort of be effective, if you're just painting. But if you're deciding on color and you're contemplating, then that's really what kills your deadline. So it's really attacking it.
That's definitely, that's my approach with oil painting in general. Is I prefer limited palette. I basically have like 4 or 5 colors, tops. But I don't know. I just think it's amazing, man. Like it's so cool too, just seeing the variety of style. Like I said, going back to the caricature thing, I am curious, like what got you into caricature at that time? Was it because of people like Chris Payne and because you definitely had like a like when you were doing your caricature stuff, you had more of a real slick, very like smoothly rendered style.
Yeah, definitely oil paint doing that for me. In those days I was drawing the image and then painting over it. So I was a little more tight because I had to I was trying to stay within the lines, of course, and not lose the likeness. That was sort of early days of painting. So you're sort of afraid to lose what's underneath, your guy. And then after I realized I didn't need the guide anymore, I never drew another image ever again on the canvas, and I just went right to the painting.
Wow.
I think that also in
So
particularly
cool.
changed my style as well. So by eliminating the drawing and just going to the painting, because when I started just painting, there'd be some things that would occur and I'd be like, wow, what just occurred there? I'm going to leave that. I'm not going to let that disappear in the final. I like what just happened there, that action that just took place. I couldn't recreate it, so I might as well not erase it and leave it be in the final painting. So that also changed my ability, my evolution. But I started out doing people because that's what I love doing. The character stuff was fun. I enjoyed it. And it was great during that period. I'd say, in the mid to late 90s, it was a golden age. And there's Dan Adele was also around doing it. I think he still does from time to time, but we were all sort of working a ton, and it was in demand. It was sort of something that my agent at the time, of course, Sarah, I was getting, constantly an offer to do this. And in those days, I'd have to turn down work, at least 2 or 3 jobs a week. And I was still busy. But that was a different time period for magazines. Yeah. And in a weird way, I saw a transition. I was sort of following it on my instincts after 9/11 occurred. I just felt like the world of humor had changed a great deal. And I was slightly in the midst of an evolution at that point. At that point, I was sort of a good 6 years into oil painting. And I was developing different sort of techniques. And I was also entranced with looking at the works in museums and seeing like Degas up close and seeing Cassatt's up close and Soroya's up close, and just seeing the incredible hieroglyphics, almost, if you'd call it that, their personal touch. And, obviously seeing a sergeant up close is almost, it melts somebody who thinks that they can paint. And sort of, it really, I think those things started to creep in, and I started to transition away along with, after that period after 9/11, to try to be a little bit more like a museum painter in a way, but with color and technique. So if anything, I would have loved to have been like a Degas of illustration. Can't say I lived up to that, but that would have been my perfect painting hero. It still is. Yeah. So there's just so much vast technique and vast evolution all the time. There's evolution all the time in Degas work. And that's what I admire. And I wanted to sort of try to sort of do that a little bit in my work. So that's sort of how I got away from caricature. And I stayed away from it just because I think it just, you
had to leave rooms for me.
Well, sure. It's the thing is, it's like, I don't know, it's when you're an artist or, or like, I don't know who you compare to, what you do when you're young is not what you do as you get older, each decade.
Well, everyone develops and grows. I mean, I'm the same way. It's funny. I mean, I love doing both realistic type portrait illustration stuff and caricature illustration stuff. I have a lot more fun when I do the caricature stuff because I feel like I get to have even more of my own voice because, when you're doing caricature work, no one's going to do it like how you do it. Like you're seeing someone a certain way and but if everyone's painting a portrait of somebody, you have your own painting style, like your own voice with how you do your brush work and maybe how you choose your color palette and that sort of a thing. But ultimately, it's going to look like the person. It's going to be a portrait, So I just feel like with caricature, there is a little bit more freedom to be expressive. And but when I do my portrait stuff, I try to, I've been in the last few years been trying to think about that, what excites me about the caricature stuff, and try to put that in portrait work as well. Just like slightly push things to make a mood or emotion. And so it's one of those things where as an artist, like I definitely relate to that, like always trying to push and just, don't forget the fact that you're creating art, because sometimes when you're doing illustration work, it can be real. You can get in like this. There's been times where it's almost like robotic, like another portrait,
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to like give yourself those kind of challenges. Where like, okay, how can I make this portrait way cooler than what someone else could do?
Right.
It's not easy all the time to have that kind of drive. But I've seen with your work, I remember, following your work and just studying like your caricature stuff, and then I remember watching you start to do like the realistic portrait stuff, and I remember being like, oh shit, you can do that too? That's awesome. And like I remember you're doing like these series of like almost like boat paintings, like people, like guys out on the docks and stuff.
Right.
And it was so completely different than what I had saw of your work before. And I started saving all those images. I have like a folder somewhere, and I just started looking at like the brushwork and everything, and just like it was awesome. It's so cool to see, even now from what you're doing. And then like later you did those. I was telling my daughter actually who I was talking to today, and she was like, "Who?" And I go, "Okay, you remember that Pride and Prejudice zombie book that I bought you? It's that guy." And she's like, "Oh," because that was amazing too. It's just so cool to see the diversity of the technique in your style.
Can I tell you something about that one? That there's an interesting story about that. The Pride and Prejudice stuff.
Yeah.
It was when I was first asked about it and if I'd be willing to do it. The art director was a really cool guy. He couldn't have been nicer. And he told me this, they were going to turn that, what's the author's name? I can't remember the author's name. Of Pride and Prejudice. Well known, of course, but I can't remember it. It's a little age thing here. He told me they were going to do zombies in this sort of old classical period. I forget what period they call this in England. But he gave me a deadline, and I think there was 12 images that he needed. He gave me a deadline, but except in the contract, he put the wrong date.
Mm-hmm.
So
oh no.
He had it in the contract for July, 15th or something like that. And then he called me 10 days before June 15th. And I only had maybe 4 or 5 of them done by this point. So I thought I had all this time. And then he goes, yeah, are you close to finish? I'm like, well, no, you're waiting till June 15th, right? He goes, no, it's July 15th. He goes, no, it's June 15th. I'm like, wait a minute. We had to go over the contract, and he screwed up the contract by accident. I told him, but it's okay. So I had to literally do a painting every day and a half. So every one of those, I'd say a majority of them are all a day and a half each.
Wow.
It was like a machine gun. There was no break. I had to go from one to another to another to another to another.
How big were they?
They weren't large. Maybe some of them 12 by 17. Some of them and 14 by 18. But that changed. That developed the technique there. To work quicker, and I didn't have time to think about it. So the way it evolved is I don't know. I just saw you go blurry there for a second. Sorry. There you go. The way it evolved nothing was very intentional. It was literally just, it would be like a live concert. I just sort of did it, and it sort of came out that way.
That's awesome. So you developed different techniques going through that experience.
My technique was to use about 4 colors, and that was it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I remember I was at a comic convention at the time when I first saw that book. I had a booth, and I was there, and I was just walking around, and I saw that book, and I was flipping through it right away. But it was as soon as I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's Roberto's work. Right away, I'm like, this is crazy. So I bought it right away. And by the way, I looked it up. It's Jane Austen.
Jane Austen, that's it. Right. Jane Austen.
She's sort of famous and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, that's awesome, man. But I wanted to get into part of this. I wanted to get into is because as a lot of people know, maybe some people don't know, but there was a time in your career that you got super, super sick, almost died. And it had a little bit, or maybe mostly, had to do with your oil painting. But would you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Because I think it's important too. Just, you've basically have written me before saying, "Hey, man, you should not be using that medium." And so,
All right, so I'm going to give you the lowdown of it. All right.
Yeah.
I worked in Manhattan in the beginning of my career, and I was working a lot. And I had a small New York apartment, so the workspace that I had was, pretty small. You get cold winters in New York, like you get cold winters in Chicago. You don't really ventilate,
Yeah.
and a proper cross ventilation system would mean like you work in a space and you have a fan to the right of you and a fan to the left of you blowing the air out a window. Now, who keeps a window open in the winter when it's like 19 degrees? Nobody. So at that time, I was using odorless mineral spirits, and I used them for years. Okay, I assumed that the odorless was sort of meant to, it wouldn't give me headaches or, and to a certain extent, that may be true, but it really is because your body adjusted to it in a negative way, not in a good way. So I used a lot of mineral spirits, Gansol, that's the one I was using, for cleaning. And I had a wood palette, so I would clean my wood palette with it. It was always around. And then when I would use liquid and a dryer for having, to be able to work over something quicker, that also contained petroleum distillates. That is the key chemical. Petroleum distillates is a carcinogen. It is in petroleum products, and it could lead to numerous deadly diseases. In my case, from constant exposure, now I could say I remember what was going on in me, and there would be issues where I felt, after, even though I was working long hours and stuff, my body just didn't feel right. I felt, weaker. And I probably, if I had a blood test at that moment, I would probably have low blood counts, red cell, white cell platelets. And obviously all the mineral oil, or not mineral oil, the mineral spirits would soak. I wasn't using any protective gloves. It would soak into my hands, obviously. It would soak in through my breathing, absorbed into my breathing. And even your eyes. The fumes will get in your eyes, and then it absorbs into your bloodstream. When it gets into your bloodstream, it goes to your bone marrow. And at that point, it could start to change things in your blood, change your DNA possibly. In my case, it created an autoimmune reaction. So I probably had low blood counts for a while I was being exposed to it for long hours. But then something triggered where the immune system just went to war against my stem cells. So I stopped slowly. It sort of slowly and then spirals quickly. You slowly stop making blood cells, and you don't know it because you're adjusting. I'm used to being tired. So I started noticing I'd go up the steps on a subway station, and then my legs would cramp up. And then I'd be like, "Oh, that's weird," and I'd be exhausted beyond belief just getting up a flight of stairs in the subway. And then I noticed all these little weird black spots on my legs, and almost like blood sores. Not like they were like they'd be like blisters, like blood blisters.
Wow.
And I was like trying to figure out what that was, and it was so alarming to me. And then I started to read that it was that kind of thing was linked to leukemia. So I became very nervous at that point. And then I was starting hearing like my heartbeat in my ear. And that's a sign of a very low red count. And at that point, I went to the doctor. I told him, I'm hearing something in my ear, like my heart is beating in my ear. And he goes, let's do a blood test. When I got a call back an hour later, he told me your hemoglobin is at like 5.4, and normal would be like 15, or not 15, but 13.
Yeah.
So 5.4. I mean, you could have a heart attack. I don't have any red cells carrying oxygen, so I could literally blow out my heart. At that point, I went into the hospital, and I thought I had leukemia. They did a bone marrow biopsy. The biopsy revealed that I didn't have leukemia, but I didn't have any stem cells, which was another classification of a disease called aplastic anemia, severe aplastic anemia. It is what Fanconi's anemia would be for like a young child. Basically, you can't make blood. So at that point, they didn't really have a solution for me. I was in a cheaper health insurance in New York. So I was just getting transfused. So this is about 2003, September 2003, I was diagnosed. So I was just living off transfusions for a while, thinking that maybe this would sort of turn around.
Yeah.
And then I spoke to an aplastic anemia MDS association in DC, and they told me I needed to see a real doctor about this. A doctor who was an expert in this, because the treatments that I was getting weren't really treatments, and they were treatments for it. So when I had my doctor write a letter to Mount Sinai's doctors, and then I had to go through a whole approval stage with my health insurance, I was sent to Mount Sinai, where they actually treated me. Except that the two treatments that I got, which is bizarre, they take antibodies from a horse, if you could believe it, and then transfuse you with it and blow out your immune system so it goes zero, and then they're kind of looking and hopefully to have it reboot. So maybe when it reboots, like the way you reboot a computer that stalls, that it won't attack the cells anymore. You know, you wipe them out and then see if it regrows, it won't attack the stem cells anymore, and then allows your stem cells to come back, and then you're back to sort of full health. But once you have that happen, you're not cured. It can happen again at any moment, at any time. So it's very possible you have maybe a 50-50 chance that it would reoccur.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, it's a devastating disease, but it's not leukemia. You're not killing leukemia, which is really hard to do. This is just having no marrow. And that's also a complication, but you don't fight cancer. So they have a way to deal with it. And in the end, I failed both my treatments. I had horse antibodies, and then they used rabbit antibodies, and the rabbit really finished me off for good. And then that's so weird. It's crazy, but that's what this was, and that it's a rare disease, so you really don't have a lot of sort of information. So I spoke to a few people that went through it. I got in communication with some people that went through it. It happened to some people through pregnancy, which is weird. In my case, they know that benzene, which is in petroleum distillates, can do this to you, create aplastic anemia. And so at that point, they were saying, we're preparing for a bone marrow transplant. And I was nervous at that point because I know I could that's a point of no return.
Yeah.
ATG wasn't going to kill me. That's the antibodies, but the bone marrow transplant could kill me.
Yeah.
So I was without an immune system for like 6 months waiting for my donor, and they found one, thankfully. And he's a great guy. I've met him, and he's like a brother to me. He came from Mexico, and he had the same sort of they measured through tissue typing, not through blood typing. It's just literally the tissue. They can find the antigens, they call it. They measure by these antigens, and we had a 12 of 12 match. So they knew that he would be a good candidate for not getting rejection. And in the cases of leukemia, they like some rejection because the rejection will go after any remaining leukemia cells. In my case, they don't want rejection because it's a complication. So they want to minimize it. So they take directly from the bone, from the donor, the hip bone, whereas leukemia they would take from the arms because they're more mature, more likely to create a rejection. So the transplant was fairly easy, but it was a complicated year to get to it, and the transplant was just a transfusion through. I had a a little thing here. I forget what you call that. And they fed it through here. It was just a transfusion. Within a week, my blood I was starting to make blood again, and then released within 3 weeks. I was cured of it. It was a difficult thing because I start again like I'm a newborn with a new immune system. So they said, it's very possible you're going to get pneumonia. And so I went about 2 years, almost 2 years, where I didn't get pneumonia. And I thought I'd be okay. I'd never get it. And then, of course, that's when I got it. So I had double pneumonia. I had to go through that. I learned how to be more cautious. And then after having kids, forget it. I was in the worst of it at that point. I had a stomach virus at least 3 times a year. I got every kind of strep throat. This is all to do with literally having the immune system starting like from zero, from age 0 again.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I'm in good space. I mean, it's I got the transplant in 2004, September of 2004. So I've been very lucky and incredibly blessed to have had a owner like Hector, who was one of the most generous. He is, in many ways, I view him and getting that transplant as an upgrade.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Literally, I feel upgraded, like more energy, more everything.
That's awesome. That's intense, man. I mean, when you were going through all of that, did you know at that time that it was because of what you were breathing in when you were painting and all that? Or is that something that you figured out after everything?
No, it was after, and by that point, like my there was a downward spiral, so there was nothing I could do about it. So it was a lot of regret, and it brought a lot of fear. And then, I had a lot of downtime because I couldn't really work. I was living back home, and my parents were wonderful with me. I wanted to paint again, but I had to really figure out how I could do it differently this time.
Yeah.
It wasn't the paint that got me sick. It was just the petroleum distillates that are in all, it's in the Gamsol, it's in all mineral spirits, anything petroleum based. Turpentine based, by the way, a pure gum spirit turpentine is not a petroleum product. That's not going to do this to you or what it did to me.
Yeah.
But that could also cause other irritations. I just want to make that difference. The mineral spirits that have petroleum product
and stuff like liquid and that
liquid has petroleum distillates.
Yeah.
So it is a very concentrated.
I am not going to use that anymore.
And a very concentrated form of,
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone is going to get sick.
Yeah, but still, I mean,
case, I'm rarity, but there are more people that get leukemia than they get aplastic anemia. So, and I would say leukemia is worse because you really have to kill everything. In my case, my marrow was almost gone. Like when I had to do all the preconditioning, it was a little bit of an easier ride. If I had a marrow full of leukemia cells, it would have been a really rough ride. I could have died pretty much trying to get to the transplant because the toxicity would be so enormous to the body. So
that's crazy. And so now when you paint with oils, you use, I think you told me before, you use like walnut oil.
Right. I use walnut oil, M-gram walnut oil, and I have 2 kinds. I use one that has an alkyd that's a natural alkyd, doesn't have a chemical alkyd in it. That's a dryer. And it's a little more amberish, but it's natural, so I don't. I know it's been tested, so M-gram would have to put a warning label if it had petroleum in it. So my guess is the resin's from tree, and it helps dry it quicker. Not as fast as liquid, but it'll dry things quicker. It'll make my paint a little stickier sooner. And then I have just a regular walnut oil, which won't. It'll probably take longer for it to dry. Like I did the Wall Street Journal painting with the walnut oil, not the alkyd, because I needed things to be more wet.
Yeah.
That whole 24-hour period. So I used a variety of 2, but I don't clean with this. I clean with this. This is what I clean with.
Oh yeah, you know what's funny? But I have a funny story about that. I clean with that as well because of you. You told me about this years ago, and I remember you said, "Now people are probably gonna look at you weird when you go into the store to buy that."
Right. Because it's a laxative. You got to go into
Yeah.
the laxative. You know, it says lubricant laxative. You know,
And I was in
3 or 4 of these. You know, as I do. It looks like, wow, you have a problem, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's like I went and got some, and I was in Evanston, which and it's like a college town, and I went into like a CVS, and it's just all these college kids in there, and working behind the counters, and I got a giant one. I just put it on the table, and the kid looked at me like, what are you doing with that?
It's an easy way to clean, but it's
cleaning my brushes.
Right. It actually is better for your brushes in the long run. Keeps your brushes in better tact. You know, mineral oil or mineral spirits rather will eat away at your brushes.
Mm-hmm.
I've had more longevity with my more sensitive brushes with it.
Yeah.
But it's you know, it takes a little longer to clean because you have to get a good jar with a nice lip on it, so you could sort of squeeze it out. You're almost like squeezing out the paint.
Yep. Yeah.
Then you have enough rags, you know.
Like I had like the jar with the ring thing in the metal rings in there, and it just kind of brush it over that, and it
takes a little more time.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
But ultimately, it's just better. You know, there's no fumes that'll kill you.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. You don't want to be dying for art. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta live for the art, not die for the art. Yeah, so that is intense, man. That's like. Are
we recording now?
Yeah, we're recording again. But yeah, it's such an intense story. When you were talking about that, I was just like getting chills. That's just insane, man. It must have been terrifying too, just not knowing.
Terrifying. I'm 33. No, I mean I don't expect to be dying at 33, 34.
Yeah.
I never had been that, sick in my life, so. The only times, and I remember well, the only times I'd be able to escape the notion, or even just in my mind, that I would constantly be remembering I was sick and I'm dying. I'm not actually living. I'm dying at this point. The only way to get away from it was, sleeping. So if I'd sleep, I would be free of any kind of, notion that death was around the corner, and then I'd wake up, and then you'd wake up to the reality of I'm dying.
Jeez. So because of this, did you start having like depression and things like that? I mean,
I had anxiety,
Yeah.
I've always had anxiety, but I would get I had one period where I literally went to, now the body produces normal body blood count, you would have over 200,000 platelets. And I remember at one point I was running out of platelets, and I knew it because I'd sneeze and my gums would start to bleed or something. And I was on the street in Manhattan, and I realized I was probably getting to a really low count. I went in for a blood test to the hospital, and in the emergency room, and I was down to 1,000 platelets. And they had to give me a transfusion. So I could have literally just, if I got bumped into or something, I got hit, I'd bleed to death, basically. So yeah, there were moments.
It's like a horror movie.
Yeah, and I never not forget this. You know what I mean? It's that this is always something. Every now and then the memories will just flow back into my head. And then just the relief that I have life again, and just being appreciative of it. But I have to tell you, there are many ways to get hurt in doing what we do. I mean, not so much digitally, but if you're painting. Yeah. And I also think that when you buy paint, now this is a Gamblin tube of paint. It's a yellow ochre. I don't buy cadmiums. I don't buy cobalts. I don't buy anything that would have a warning label on it that would tell me that the state of California finds whatever's in this tube to cause cancer. That's a warning. You don't buy that. You look for I look for the ASTM label, and they usually are the people testing to see if there are chemical products in here that could be harmful to humans. That's really the best way to sort of know that you're working with safe materials, because we're always getting dirty. Paint will get on your hands, your wife brushes on your leg or something, and that was a bad habit that I did. I'd wipe my brushes on my leg, or with my pants, thinking, well, that it'll just stay on there. But it was going into my leg, all the chemicals from the mineral spirit. I mean, I was just totally reckless. And they never teach you that in art school, by the way.
Yeah. I used to have this really bad habit when I would paint with watercolors, and I didn't realize I was doing it until one time I was doing a demo somewhere. I love watercolor painting, but when I use watercolor, I work with I use Winsor Newton Series 7. They're really nice brushes, but they always have that. They can come to this really nice tip and everything. And I was doing this thing I didn't realize is I rinse in the water and then I would I would use my mouth to get it pointy and I'd go back in. And I didn't even know I was doing that. It's just something I did. I don't do that with oil painting, obviously, but for some reason I think I felt, it's watercolor, whatever, and I don't know. Someone came up to me afterwards and I noticed that you lick your brush a lot. Don't you think that's kind of dangerous? You could, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I do that. I realized when they said that I was doing that. So I had to make a conscious effort after that. Hey, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? I don't know. It was just this weird thing. It wasn't like I was sucking off paint. It was mostly rinsed off by that point, but still, there's still cadmiums and different things in there. And
right. I mean, and they're wonderful colors. I mean, I had a hard time initially trying to find colors that I could adjust to, because my fear was, I get rid of the cadmiums, I'm going to have very transparent paint. How do I sort of deal with that?
Yeah.
And that also changed the way I painted too. Was I found supplemental colors though. For the reds were harder though.
Yeah, that is.
I went to Old Holland has incredible reds.
Yeah.
Don't have cadmiums and that are ASTM safe.
Little pricey.
They are pricey.
But they're really good paint though. They're amazing.
One tube, could last a good half a year, and it's so rich in pigment and tone that you don't have to put a lot out there. And I oil up everything on the palette, so I extend it a little bit more.
Yeah.
At least I feel like it's a price worth paying to not have to deal with potential killer.
Yeah. No, that's I'm so happy that you were able to talk about this, because it's important. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that just have no idea, and they don't talk about that in art school. They don't talk about.
I know I
never knew about it until it happened to you. I never would have thought about it.
There's an artist, was a great artist in illustration named Julian Allen. I never got to meet him. I don't really know him. I never knew him personally, rather. So I can't say I have a full background on him, but I know that he used to be an oil painter. And he did, in the end, I started seeing more watercolor portraits. But he would do oil painting, but he died of lymphoma fairly young, in his 60s. Lymphoma would be another disease that you could easily get from art supply stuff that have benzene, petroleum distillates, or even things like, people who had, were in the paste up world, when magazines were produced by hand rather than on a computer. A lot of rubber cement and paste ups and all those chemicals. I remember being transfused one day at the hospital and talking to a guy who had MDS, which is another bone marrow disease. It's like a cancer, and not as pernicious as a leukemia, which could be acute immediately, but MDS is still a cancer. And he thinks he got it from doing all the years of paste up, from breathing in and absorbing all the stuff into his hands. All this stuff, it's not, they can't say scientifically for sure, like a smoking gun, that this is what caused your thing. But, if you have enough, knives around and you're bleeding, where it's coming.
It's interesting. The one thing that you said that really that I could relate to immediately was just like I used Liquin not that long ago. I had to get a bunch of these portraits done really quick, and you had told me like don't use that stuff, but like at the end of the day, my eyes would just be burning. And it never really happened to me before painting with oils, but and then I started thinking that you said it can go right into your eyes and everything. And I remember years ago, this is a long time ago, I was trying to do live caricature I was doing it at Navy Pier, and they were using airbrush at the time, and I had never used airbrush, and so I had to teach myself how to do that. Oh, great. Sorry. Might have to pause for a second.
Sure.
Hold on a second. Okay, so trying to do this again. Leaf blower was outside, so hopefully we don't hear that again. But anyways, what I was saying about the airbrushing thing was that I just did it for like one day a week for one summer. I was just I didn't know what I wanted to do yet, and I thought, oh, this might be kind of fun. It turned out it wasn't for me, the live thing. But I remember at the end of every day, I'd get my stuff and I'd get on the subway and the L train and go home, and my nose would just be black, and I would start just cleaning it out, and all day long while I'm airbrushing stuff, it's just all going up inside. And there's dudes that did that for years, or like Mark Fredrickson.
Yeah.
I've talked with him before about it, and just like the years of just like it's so funny. Everyone talks about how he's like the most amazing airbrush artist of all time, and and rightfully so. The guy's amazing. But it's funny if you talk to him, he's like, I'll never do it again. I hate it. He says, I hate it. I hate airbrush painting. I don't want to talk about it. I hate it. It's just really funny how aggressively angry he is about airbrushing. Like, I never want to touch one again.
I actually think it was pretty complicated. I just messed around with it once in art school. It is. Change the inks and stuff like that, and the loud compressor. You just felt like you might as well just be on a factory assembly line.
Yeah. No, it's a really difficult medium. There's dudes that can just do crazy stuff with it though, but when he discovered digital painting, he was like, no more.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And he flourished in it. So
yeah.
It was like
he did like 1 million mad covers. It's just crazy. Speaking of mad covers, man, one of my favorites of yours that I always went back to was the one that you did. It's just there was something about the lighting and everything. It's the one with Alfred E. Newman and the Chihuahua.
Oh yeah.
Cement. I just always loved that. Like I was like, wow, the lighting, everything just looks so real. And that whole time period for me, there's pieces like that were just mind blowing for me because I was like, oh, you can do that? Wow. Because there was a time when I was first starting where I refused to use a reference because for some reason I thought, a real artist just can do it from his head. Oh. And then one day I realized that is really stupid. Yeah. And I started like shooting my own references and stuff, and then controlling my lighting, and I'm like, oh man, I can actually make my own lighting and pose someone and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden I was just like, I was off to the races. But it is funny how when you first start, you just don't know, and I'm pretty much self-taught. By the time I went to art school, I was already 26. Yeah, I was 26 and I had already been working professionally. So I already kind of was like figuring it out. By the time I went to art school, I already kind of knew what I was doing. And so, there was a lot of learning the hard way. Like early on, I was doing like some of my first illustrations for magazines. It was like I was painting on illustration board, and it would be acrylic. One piece would have acrylic, watercolor, color pencil, maybe even some pen and ink in there. It was just like anything to get the look, It was just kind of one of those, terrible experimental times, I even did a painting once in coffee. Like I used coffee for, I don't know why. I just
to age the paper or to actually draw with it.
I did a painting of Jack Nicholson, and it was with watercolor and coffee. I don't know what I was thinking. I was experimenting. I don't know. totally ruined my brush and everything.
As long as it wasn't in blood.
Yeah. But anyways, we've got some I got some questions for you.
Sure.
So what I've been trying to do is, because I think it's more interesting and fun for the podcast, is I try to get people to call in, or not call in, but basically leave a voice message, send an audio, because it's just more entertaining. It's more fun to hear people's voices. And a friend of mine from England, Paul Moyes, he said he was too busy to send an audio, and so I'm a little disappointed, Paul. So anyways, I'm gonna read his question, and I'm gonna try to sound like Paul. So this is what you get, Paul, for not sending the audio.
Remember, is Paul from the north of England? Because his accent would be a little different. Or
let's not get picky. I'm gonna go full on Monty Python here. like what? What's your preferred support? Oh, like sound like a goose or something.
That's cockney. That's
yeah. No, he doesn't sound like that. He's more like. No, I'm not gonna be able to do that. But this is his first question. He's got 3 questions for you. His first question is, what's your preferred support? No, he doesn't sound like that either. No, he says, what is your preferred support to paint on, and how do you prepare it?
Support. Okay, you mean like the surface that I paint on?
He's fucking British.
They have different ways of painting.
What kind of knickers do you wear?
All right, so here's the thing. I've learned some things about this over the years. Initially, I used to paint on illustration board, and I was even doing oil paintings without even priming the thing.
Oh, wow.
And they're actually still intact. And I was told the acid in the paint would just eventually eat away the illustration board, but Strathmore illustration board is a superior product. And then I would gesso those, and I'd had a period where a lot of my illustrations were gessoed on illustration board. And then I made a transition to canvas, but the canvas that I was using at that time would have been cotton duck canvas. So a lot of paintings were on that I would get just from the art supply store. And then I was at a store in New York that I used to love to go to when I lived there, Soho Art Store, it was called. And they were starting to tell me, actually, the old masters used to paint with lead white on the canvas. It would be a lead white primed canvas that they would have to prepare with Rabskin glue and all that stuff. And that's complicated stuff. Mm-hmm. But I do not want to paint on lead white. Although I did try it, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. But I just wanted to paint on a titanium oil-based canvas. And so I get it by the roll now. I have this art supplier in New Jersey that is the best. I recommend you, if you ever want to get painting supplies, to use them. They give you the best prices. So I buy a roll of oil-primed linen, and I stretch my canvases. I buy the stretcher bars, and I do it with tacks, not with staples. I find the tacks to be better. Everything is really old school, traditional. That was, that they did for 500 years before all this new stuff of gesso and staples and all that. And I find it just works better. The paint flows better on an oil primed canvas. And I'm going to even tell you, I don't recommend everybody or anybody really get the lead prime. But if you really want to know why a painting in a museum looks different than anything you could ever create on a canvas, a cotton canvas, or even an acrylic primed piece of linen, is because the oil priming is like a glass surface. Mm-hmm. So when you do underpainting on it, it literally reacts differently. It doesn't absorb exactly the way a cotton canvas does. It's almost like you're painting with butter on glass. Yeah. So the movement is different. The strokes are different. The paint looks completely different on that. And it looks more, you start to see like, oh, that's how that looked. Why it looked like that in a museum and why it doesn't look like that in my studio. Because they were painting on a lead primed canvas. And it's a world of difference. I'm not saying to do that because, lead is obviously toxic. But if anyone were ever to wonder why painting looks so different in museums than it does in modern day, it is the lead white.
Yeah, there's a company called New Tradition Panels, and that's what I get a lot of my, because I like painting on linen, but I like they basically attach it to like a nice piece of wood, you know. So I like that harder surface, but they do the oil prime for you, like they pre-do it, so it costs a little extra, but it's that same thing you're talking about. Just it moves so much different. It feels really good.
And it just overall, like I mean, if I were to turn my camera here, you could see that is literally how all the stuff is stored now.
That's awesome.
I remove them off the stretcher bars, and I just lay them flat, you know.
Yeah.
And that's how things are stored, or else I wouldn't have any room to store all this stuff. I keep the stretcher bars. I reuse them, so I just have them in my garage hanging up, and I just reuse them constantly. So,
oh, that's awesome.
I mean, they have like, I don't know, hundreds of nail holes in them, but it's still, I'm always still finding a new area where to nail into.
So then if you submit one of those pieces to like a show, you just have to restretch it and frame it and all that.
I've done that enough times to know how to do that fairly.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more work. I mean, it's a little more process, but in the end, I feel like, I don't know, I benefit from it because I like sort of switching it up, like, you know, and not sort of being in the same spot all the time. So when I stretch my canvas, I'm in another area stretching it. And there's something just kind of beautiful I enjoy it for whatever crazy reason.
Yeah.
There's a thrill. It's like, I don't know, it'd be like tuning an instrument or something. You're getting excited to play it. So you're just preparing it, and you feel love.
Well, it's also important, I think, like part of that stuff is like the fun of it, you know, like I think it's important to make sure you're having fun, you know?
Absolutely. And that's why it's all, I mean, the traditional stuff for me is fun. So I stick with it for that reason.
So he's got two more questions, but
Sure.
I'll just do them at once because they kind of go together a little bit. So when using oils on a tight deadline, how does the time factor affect your process? We kind of talked about that a little bit. And do you get last minute adjustments from an art director? And if so, how does working in oils, specifically with the drawing time, affect this?
Okay, so the drawing time, like I said, it's the sketch time. That's the only time I draw is when I do present them a sketch. Once a sketch is done, I have it on my computer. I look at it, and then I just put my painting near it, and then I just sort of use my eye to sort of and block in areas and loosely, and then draw with the paint basically.
Mm-hmm.
Deadline I'm always conscious of, so I'm trying to like be strategic, you know, maybe block in areas and go in and start the faces quickly. Mm-hmm. and deal with something a little bit later, let something dry a little bit longer, and then go into that area. You know, you have to sort of know what stuff you're putting down and you want to dry a little bit before you go into it, and then you start working in other areas. It's never like literally painting to completion.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you're painting a bit here, moving, painting, moving, painting. That's how you sort of manage a deadline that's quick.
Mm-hmm.
They don't come often. I don't get too many like one day turnarounds. Occasionally.
And what about like the second part? Like when you're doing, like if an art director is like, hey, because we all get that as illustrators, where it's like you finish the painting and they're like, oh, could you actually make them looking that way or whatever?
That usually never happens. If it would, it'd be in the sketch phase. I let them know. People know that once they agree on the sketch, that if they start making changes, it's going to cost them.
You know what I think what they're doing to us illustrators that work digitally, I think they're taking advantage of that, because there are so many times where I spent so much time detailing. They know, like for example, I did 2 paintings for Reader's Digest, one of Hillary and one of Trump, and they wanted super realistic paintings, and they know what Hillary looks like. Sure. All right, they know she looks like a wrinkled raisin. Okay, you ask me to do a very realistic painting, I'm going to spend hours rendering wrinkles and stuff. Sure. And then and they saw my sketches. In my sketches, there's wrinkles. They could have said from the beginning, let's try to like let's try to make her face look like plastic. You know, they should have told me that from the beginning, but they didn't, of course. And I spent all this time on it. I handed in, really happy with what I did. But also like, wow, that was a lot of work. And basically they're like, oh yeah, can you like remove like 90% of those wrinkles? You mean all the stuff that I spent hours rendering?
Yeah.
Oh, that kind of stuff happens, and it's just infuriating. But
see, there are times where I got that. They would just say, "Can you make somebody a little more flattering?" And
Yeah.
I've done it enough times in my career to know that it's probably better to to at least present something a little more soft.
Oh no, yeah, I know. I mean,
Whenever they ask me to do something, I almost expect that.
Yeah.
But even as a painting, I don't really want to spend too much time on the face. So I will soften up areas. I mean, look at what Sargent does. You know.
Yeah.
Paint wrinkle.
It's true. Like there's definitely. I'm finding myself becoming way more painterly with like the realistic portrait stuff too. But like a few years ago, I did chef for like the post office stamps. I did like a bunch of stamps, and I had to do Julia Child 3 times, like start to finish. And it was like really frustrating because they gave me the reference and you know, not to be rude, but she kind of looked like an orangutan near the end. I mean, she just, I mean, it was crazy how many, you know, and in my mind, I'm like, I'm trying to best capture this person. And you know what? She still looked good. She still, you know, I didn't even go crazy with, you know, it was still soft, and it was still not enough. It was still going back in, and it was like, remove it. Okay. Now I had to explain one time, do you know, like the reason that she's got these wrinkles is because years of smiling and laughing and different things. If I get rid of those, it's not going to look like her anymore. Like these specific ones that you don't like, that's what captures her character.
Yeah.
These other ones we can get away with, like certain forehead wrinkles or different things. But you know, anyways, there's one more question that someone left a voicemail. I must prepare you. It's a little odd,
Okay.
but that's part of the fun. So.
Yes. Hello, this is Anthony Crosby, long-time listener, first-time caller. You know, I have a question for Roberto. Excuse me. I was reading in this book, and it said that Roberto was born in North Arlington, New Jersey, in 1969. Sometime around age 8, his mother took him to New York, and to the Metropolitan Museum, that is. And it was a defining moment for little Roberto. And my question, then it says that by the age of 12, Parada was studying the works of Da Vinci and Michelangelo and doing his own paintings, not quite up to their standards, of course, but not bad for a lad of 12. And I was wondering, is that true? Thank you.
Did you understand what he said?
I feel like I know that guy somehow. He's just putting on a like that fake voice. But all right, I didn't get the Da Vinci stuff so much, but I could say that all that stuff about my mother was true. My mom was like my sort of the person who introduced me to the world of art. I used to draw, though, in school, in grammar school all the time, and I'd get in trouble for it. So my mom figured, well, you like doing this. Let's go see a real museum with real paintings. You have yet to see real paintings. So at 8, she took me to the Met, and then my whole world changed at that point because I actually saw a real painting. And was stunned, I'd see a Rubens, and I can't believe something that large, and it was actually done by hand and by paint. Yeah. It was so. It was like a transition moment.
Mm-hmm.
For me. At that point, I was like, this might be it. This might be what I can do. I knew I could draw, but painting was like now the whole new world to me. What was he saying about the Da Vinci thing? I'm not quite sure.
I think it's something like you studied Da Vinci or Michelangelo when you were like 12. You were trying to paint like them or something.
Now that is true. I had taken out some library books and I was trying to recreate a lot of the drawings, all those beautiful Michelangelo drawings, and some of the Da Vinci drawings. But I was probably more into the Michelangelo drawings.
Yeah,
and
too.
I tried to create. I think I was about 12. I think exactly like he said. I tried to recreate in oil pastels the creation of man, the whole finger thing.
Oh yeah.
And that was my first attempt, and it was large, and and it was really the first attempt to try to create like an old masters.
That's awesome. Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to show you some fan art real quick before we get out of here. But just before that, it is time for Serious Questions with Jason Seiler. And the serious question is, it actually is sort of a serious question,
Sure.
But what I'm interested in is the true gritty reality is, as an illustrator, there's times when I'm sure you've had certain situations where you were sick, not like what we were talking about before, but like, or like terrible headache, migraine or something, but you have a deadline. But what I'm interested in is, what was the absolute worst experience that you've ever had as an illustrator working on a deadline?
Oh boy. And this would have been before I was sick. All right. So I was still kind of pretty green and painting in oil. And I took on a huge job with Esquire. Huge. It was a 3-page gatefold, and it was a sort of a Bosch-like depiction of the entertainment industry, mostly Disney. It was their big issue, their dubious awards issue. And I had lost a little bit of time because I attempted to do a Der Spiegel cover before that, and I kind of knew that it might sort of cut into my painting time. And I was getting nervous. The Der Spiegel thing I finished, but it didn't get used. Funny
that's a surprise.
Funny story about that is I actually met with the art director in New York at the time. He was, they're in Hamburg, Germany. He was visiting with his wife, and he asked me to meet him for dinner with his wife and bring the sketch. Mm-hmm. And I brought the sketch. We met in New York, and I guess I was pretty tired. I was holding up the sketch to show him and didn't realize that I was doing it right over the candle in the table. And my sketch went up in flames, showing it. And I had no idea. And he's like, give me a panic, like, get that away. So it was a moment I never forgot. And we laugh about it today, of course. But that was the worst deadline for me, the Esquire thing, because I was literally, I had to do almost 2 24-hour days to sort of get through it. It was so excruciating, and I had a panic attack in the middle of it.
Yeah,
because I was thinking I was going to fail the deadline, and at that point I was just emerging with Esquire, and I had a great relationship just beginning, and I was about to fail them.
Yeah,
and I really freaked out. I had a panic attack. Never had a panic attack before, and I was still living at home at this time because I was still sort of early in my career. I was still trying to build up a career before I'd moved to Manhattan. So my mom was with me during that period, and she remembers it. And at one point I couldn't, I wouldn't let her leave the room because I was so nervous about I was getting shaky, and I literally needed my mom there sort of to talk to while I was working to sort of get through it all. And I managed to get through it, and it was sort of maybe the worst experience. The painting turned out to be a success, but it was very much like I never came that close to failure before or since after that. So that was the worst experience. The funny thing about my mom, when I was living at home, my mom would actually be my messenger. with clients. I was calling her the mommy messenger. She would, as soon as I was done with the painting, and this is, like I said, early on. So if I was doing a painting with Entertainment Weekly, they had their own photo studio there. They could shoot the painting. She would just get, like, those walking shopping carts that, like, take. So I would prepare the painting, put it in a box. I would probably have done an all-nighter. I put it in a box, gave it to her. I would pay her $20 to get on a bus to go and take it into Manhattan while I go crash.
Yeah.
And he would show up, literally hand the painting to the art director. And they were just like, who's this old lady coming in with the painting? And they had no idea. I was my messenger.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a fun thing. Like they seemed to remember it and loved it.
That's awesome.
And she would also try to wait until they saw it to give me the reaction. She would tell me what they thought of it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a good mom.
I don't know of any other illustrator that did that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Oh, that's awesome. And that was Serious Questions with Jason Seiler.
Excellent.
So, that's cool, man. All right, so I'm going to show you some fan art. And just let me know when you see this. You see it?
I see it.
So this is kind of appropriate. This first one is by Juan Gastelum, and I think it's funny because obviously, I first knew your work from early Mad stuff, or not early Mad stuff, but like that's when I first saw your stuff. And I just finally got my first Mad cover. I've been waiting for since I was 10 years old. I finally got my first Mad cover, and now they're basically dun dun dun. And I like how they wrote Jason faces the truth. Thanks for crushing my dreams, man.
It's just the whole magazine world. It's unfortunate what happened to it. It used to be a great industry. I mean, even when we still do work, it's still great to do work in magazines, but
yeah,
I can just tell you from somebody who was there when it was like the golden age. It's another world, man. It's not what it used to be.
Yeah, yep. I've known just even from my first beginnings till now. I've noticed a huge difference.
It's the Facebook effect. Facebook everything.
Yeah. This one is by Matthew Masterson.
Nice. This should definitely showing my age there.
It's cool though.
But that's it. Yeah, that definitely that looks like me.
This next one is by Lars Erik Robinson. So he went and he did one for my last podcast with artist Joshua Bean, and for some reason it got lost in the mix. So this is the one that he did of you, but here's one he did last week. So I just wanted to share that just because I felt bad that it got missed. So that was pretty cool.
Really good. I mean, want to go back to that one?
Yeah. It's
all my angles there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's cool.
Good. Very good. I like this. I like the one that was on with the hat. That I think.
Oh yeah.
That one's my favorite there.
It's cool. Yeah, it's a nice. There's a nice movement to everything too. It's like loose and it's cool. So this one is by Reza Mokhtarjozani.
Reza Jazani.
Mokhtarjozani or something. Oh, there on the bottom. So they added some other weird thing in the name. I should have just looked at that. So Reza Jazani. There we go. It's much easier.
Oh. He must have did that with are these digital or are they actually?
Some of them are digital. This one to me looks like color pencil.
Yeah, it looks like colored pencil.
Yeah, and maybe it looks like they did some digital shading on the lower half or something, like a shadow or something.
Right.
But this one's by Eugenio Candia.
I got the nose right.
So yeah. Whoop. This one here is by Dominic Zeilinger.
Oh, I like that one a lot.
Yeah. He always has a very interesting style. thinks about things a little bit differently. It's cool. Last week he did one where with the plein air painter I had on, and he actually did like 4 different like steps, so you could see, it was like a cartoon step by step. It was pretty genius how he did it too. It was funny.
I liked how he used for my cleft chin. He used like that sort of the @ symbol.
Yeah, yeah, it is pretty funny. This is by Ari Jordan.
Oh, cool! Wow, that leather jacket looks really well rendered. Excellent.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
My eyes are funny like that too. I feel like I always have one eye that's higher than the other. That's very true.
Yeah. Yeah, some people do have that. It's kind of weird.
Looks good.
This is by Blake Loosely.
Nice.
So, yeah, I like this.
Right? Or is that, or do you know?
What did you say?
Is that's digital as well?
Oh yeah. This is digital. Yeah. But I like the kind of simplicity of the brushwork. It's kind of nice. Like just like the basic shapes like that. It's very kind of painterly blocked in.
And that's the whole thing about character. You really have to. It's got to feel like the person, even if you exaggerate. It still has to feel like the person. It needs definitely feel like me.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, there's people out there that, I've been teaching online for an online caricature class for schools for I think 11 or 12 years. I think 2006 or something is when I started. And that's one thing I'm always telling students, like there's people out there that just can render the hell out of something, but the person doesn't look like the person. Like you gotta make sure, like, your rendering ability is amazing, but you gotta get the most important part is that it feels like the person, looks like the person. Once you have that, then start painting.
That's life and death for an illustrator who paints people. Like if you're an illustrator who can't really capture a likeness, you're not going to work. But if you're exceptional at capturing a likeness, and if you do, and you bring something else to the table, like you're going to distinguish yourself. That was the key ingredient for me. I think was that I was always able to get the likeness.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's huge.
Yeah. So, that's spectacular.
Yeah, this is cool. This is by Christopher Hirschman.
Wow, I love that. That's excellent.
Yeah, really cool. I like the treatment of the shoulders and the jacket kind of softening into the background. It's nice.
I'm almost on like fire. It looks like.
Yeah.
That's terrific. That might be my favorite so far.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Amazing.
This one is by Michelle Pendergrass. Do you know Ed Steckley?
Yes.
This kind of reminds me a little bit of Ed.
Yeah. That nose would definitely not be me though. It's not the bulbous enough. That looks a little too pointy, but I look pretty there. That's for sure.
Yeah. You look pretty like Ed Steckley.
Yeah, exactly.
It's nice.
Sure.
This is by Juan Ramon Guerrero. I get the honor to butcher everyone's names every time. So
that's good too. They got the blue and they got it's nice.
Yeah, it's interesting. Oh, this is an interesting style too. This is by Laurent Grasset.
I love the technique.
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice. I like when artists do that with digital paint, when they're just kind of just all over the place with it. It's a nice energy to it instead of being like super slick.
Yeah, it's easier to be slick. It's harder to be like it's harder to like paint with balls out.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Or you don't know how to correct a mistake. A lot of those painters who do that know how to correct a mistake when they shoot. That's good.
Oh yeah, for sure. This is by Wanderly Fernandez.
That makes me laugh. That was cool.
Yeah. This almost looks like you're like it looks like some kind of flag, and you're like the political leader or dictator of.
I wonder if they might have seen, like, I did one Obama portrait where I had a red and blue divide like that. And so I wonder if maybe they were seeing that or inspired by that. That's
Could be, yeah.
That's what it rings right now.
That's funny.
I just love the mouth and the chin there.
Yeah, that's funny. This is interesting. This is marker. It looks like marker on paper.
In about another 20 years, maybe.
Yeah. This is Glenn Urban. Yeah.
Now, my wife would definitely want me to dye my hair at that point.
Yeah.
That's funny.
This is by Jason Church.
Oh, nice.
So your wife doesn't like the grays? She doesn't like the silver fox thing?
She's never complimented me on it, so.
Oh. See, I got a few grays coming in, and my wife's always like, "Oh, silver fox." I'm like, "All right." She makes me feel good about it, so we'll see.
I think it's just sort of we I'm a little bit older than her, I guess, because I've had dark hair for so long.
Yeah.
And maybe the last couple of years, it really has gone pretty gray. So I think she's a little bit worried that I'm getting a lot older.
Well, it's funny. I still I can grow. I know I can grow a mustache. Obviously, everyone has seen that. But I cannot grow any facial hair except for a mustache and like a little bit on my chin. And now it's starting to come. I'm starting to get like white mustache hairs. And it's like, if I ever am able to, I can't even grow sideburns. Like nothing grows.
I can't grow them.
Yeah. So, but I'm always thinking that if one day finally I can actually grow full facial hair, it's going to be white. It's not going to be cool anymore. I'm going to look like David Letterman.
I actually like the white. I mean, I think it's kind of fun to age in a way.
Yeah. This is a fun one. This is by Adita Bahasser.
I love their hair.
Yeah.
I mean, they all capture me in my chipmunk cheeks. Everyone's
you kind of look like one of the seven dwarfs in this. It's happy,
but everyone's captured a lot of the distinguishable features here.
Yeah.
That was good.
Cool. Let's see. So this one is by Ryan Biddle.
Definitely. I'm not sure if they got me there, but it's kind of a creative attempt there.
Yeah. This one is by Paul Moyes.
Okay, Paul. I feel like it's Roberto Parada trying to be David Byrne, maybe. But I think that one's also pretty funny as well.
Yeah.
They're all terrific.
Yeah, I like the distance between the eyes. It's nice.
With the leather jacket, though, I'm really impressed with.
Oh yeah.
The amount of great detail everyone's put in on the leather jacket.
Yeah, this is it's nice. I think it's nice too seeing a pencil drawing. I
Sure.
like that. I think this is the last one, and this is by Scott Anderson.
Oh yeah, I know Scott.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Yeah.
I see now. Yeah, I could see the Scott influence.
Yeah.
That's terrific.
Yeah, nice work on that jacket again too.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow, he really put some time into that.
Yeah.
I'm impressed.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So let's see. And what I'll do is I'll actually email these all to you, and then you can look over them and just let me know which one was your favorite, and then they're gonna win a Wacom Cintiq. So
Cool.
Which is pretty cool. So yeah, I mean we've been talking for quite a bit. This has been awesome, man. This has been like super informative, and I really appreciate you sharing the personal stuff, because I think that's like really it's interesting. It's not only just interesting, but also just super important. If you're out there oil painting, hopefully you paid attention to that, because I know I definitely will not be using liquid anymore. It's so scary, and I'm gonna look at my Terpenoid and try to replace that, because I'm sure, like you said, I'm gonna look for the P word.
It's just a matter of, like, as most artists don't even have great health care to begin with.
Yeah.
Like don't try to make it worse or harder for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And by being sick and, and that stuff just lowers your blood count, and that makes you more vulnerable to all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it leads to cancer, forget it. That's the battle of a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really need to have to use that stuff, and like people use like fixative and stuff. Look, if you have to use something like that, just use it in a safe way, outside, proper respirator, gloves, cover yourself up. Don't be, looking to, expose yourself. Joe Morris is another person, the only other artist that I know that, had to deal with some tough issues with all the chemical stuff. He didn't, what I got, but he had to go through sort of a whole, awareness and getting sick, although he was able to recover. He changed the way he worked. He had to like literally work outside with like all kinds of gear just to be safe, but that's still like a hard way to work.
Mm-hmm.
There's ways to work safe and easy and not wreck your comfort zone.
Yeah, for sure.
Just remember, you don't have to use that stuff. You don't have to do it to make art.
It's not like it's like 500 years ago. I mean, there's all kinds of supplies and different brands and different things you can choose from. So
cadmium colors. If you want something to dry quicker, you could always add a little bit of raw umber or a little bit of a burnt umber and something, and like maybe have it change the look of your painting. Like the fact that I have colors that aren't cadmium colors, I add a little bit of white into all the reds that I have, or the yellows, or an orange or something. A little bit of white to give it a little more opaqueness, and most likely, there's white in every color, so it's probably dead on anyway.
Yeah, that's awesome. So before we cruise, is there anything that you want to promote? Anything coming up, or you just your website, or anything that people can check out?
Well, I always say, my Instagram, Roberto Parada Art, and on Facebook, I always post new stuff there, or comments. Comments people like, some comments people don't like, but I don't have anything personally I promote. I mean, I have stuff coming out, but 2 stamps coming out, but I'll probably be able to show those, and also going to be doing something for a private commission, but it's for a magazine that I probably won't be able to show anything yet. Sometimes I'll do little snippets like you do as well.
Yeah.
On Instagram of little details. But everything that's new will be mostly on Instagram or Facebook.
Cool.
My website, of course, but I'm more delayed on my website than I am.
Yeah, me too. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much. This has been an honor for me, man. It's so good to we've talked a few times in the past on the phone, but never face to face. So this has kind of been awesome, man.
Yes. I mean, if you ever want to Skype me or ask questions anytime, about something.
Yeah.
But
sure.
I'm always, even though, you might work digitally, you're still a painter. We always have questions. I still have questions about painting, and I'm always trying to discover things. So, the discovery is good.
Yeah, for sure, man. Awesome. High five. All right.
All right.
See you, man.